to the complicated legacy of Julian Assange and the oft-repeated question, is he a hero or a villain, or a mixture of the two?
I'm Julian Assange.
Roger, I'll get you into space.
Editor of WikiLeaks. We've exposed the world's secrets.
These documents belong to the United States government.
Been attacked by the powerful.
The United States strongly condemned.
Hey, quit asking questions.
He broke the law.
Illegally shoot the son of a...
For 500 days now, I've been detained without charge. But that hasn't stopped us.
That is the intro to Julian Assange's TV show, The World Tomorrow, a series of 12 political interviews on the Kremlin-controlled propaganda outlet Russia Today. Reviewing it back in 2012, The Guardian's Luke Harding, who had worked closely with Assange, concluded the WikiLeaks founder was not a fearless revolutionary, but a useful idiot. And 12 years on, following Assange's guilty plea to one US charge of espionage and his return to Australia a free man to a rock star welcome, the debate rages on, with Seven's The Nightly making clear where they stand.
The weasel has landed.
Hack on Aussie soil. Guilty Assange touches down.
And that damning verdict was echoed by Sharri Markson, who told her loyal band of Sky News viewers,
"This perverted megalomaniac with a victim mentality will be free to unleash further anti-Western propaganda and mayhem onto the world."
With Sharri wrongly claiming,
I mean, people don't even mention anymore that he was actually convicted of rape.
Arrest warrant, yes. Convicted, no. And she later corrected it. But with Assange, some of the most important facts can't be agreed on. Like the American judge's finding last week that no one was harmed by WikiLeaks' disclosures.
She said that she accepted that there were no victims of Julian Assange's actions.
A point emphasised by Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, on 7:30 last week.
The US government could not identify one victim who deserved restitution in this case, not one victim who suffered actual harm. And it's important the public hear and understand that.
That no-harm conclusion is remarkable, given the relentless pursuit of Assange by US authorities for 7 years. And it was immediately challenged by the US Department of Justice, which claimed that WikiLeaks' revelations had
placed individuals who had assisted the US government at great personal risk. Assange subjected these individuals to serious harm and arbitrary detention.
But as we try to sort out what the truth really is, just bear in mind what Guardian editor Alan Rusbridger said in 2011, after, like so many, falling out with his publication partner.
He's such an extreme figure that he absolutely polarises people. So there are people who project on him and want to believe he's the Messiah, and then there are some people who want to believe he's the devil.
So, how did Assange get to be so hated and so loved? A host of reasons: hygiene and table manners, allegations of rape, links to Russia, and putting people's lives at risk. But, on the other hand, exposing the secrets of Western governments, including US war crimes, torture at Guantanamo, and mass civilian casualties in Afghanistan and Iraq. Back in 2010, WikiLeaks published 500,000 classified documents stolen from US military databases by Private Chelsea Manning, including this now famous video of a US helicopter crew firing on civilians and journalists in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad.
It shows 18 people, including 2 Reuters journalists, walking through a courtyard. The camera being carried by one of the journalists is wrongly identified as a weapon.
That's a weapon, yeah.
The order is given to engage.
Light them all up.
And the helicopter opens fire.
Hey, Roger. Keep shooting.
A dozen people were killed by that 2007 US strike, which America lied about and covered up. Worldwide headlines greeted the revelation, and months later, another drop. Thousands of secret US military files, titled the Afghan War Diary, which Assange claimed exposed US war crimes.
Deaths of children, insurgents, allied forces. So this is the story of the war since 2004.
WikiLeaks published much of this material in partnership with the New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, Der Spiegel and El País, winning awards for journalism around the world, including a Walkley. But faced with 500,000 documents, Assange and his partners argued constantly over whether or how much they needed to redact them. The New York Times explaining,
"We took great care to excise anything that would put lives at risk or jeopardise ongoing military missions."
WikiLeaks said it too had withheld some 15,000 reports to protect informants. But journalists in Britain and the US soon reported that the Taliban was using the logs to hunt down informants because they
gave the names or other identifying features of dozens of Afghan informants, potential defectors and others who were cooperating with American and NATO troops.
And an expert on Afghanistan was telling a New Yorker podcast,
people named in those documents have a reasonable belief that they're going to get killed, or actually the way it works with the Taliban, if they can't find you, they'll take your brother instead.
Human rights groups like Amnesty International urged WikiLeaks to remove the names. Assange showed little interest. But an even bigger row over WikiLeaks came a year later, in September 2011, when Assange decided, after running a Twitter poll, to release a cache of 250,000 US diplomatic cables, with none of the names blacked out, thus publishing
more than 1,000 cables identifying individual activists, several thousand labelled with a tag used by the US to mark sources it believes could be placed in danger, and more than 150 specifically mentioning whistleblowers.
This huge document dump was condemned by Assange's journalistic partners, who issued a joint statement to say,
"We deplore the decision of WikiLeaks to publish the unredacted State Department cables, which may put sources at risk."
The WikiLeaks decision was also condemned by human rights groups, by Reporters Without Borders, and by the Index on Censorship, which campaigns for free expression worldwide. So, was anyone actually harmed? US lawyers claimed in court in 2020 that
the dissemination of specific classified documents, unredacted, put dissidents in Afghanistan and Iraq at risk of serious harm, torture, or even death.
And they went on to claim that some had disappeared, while admitting they could not prove that the WikiLeaks revelations were responsible. Last week, the US judge that freed Assange concluded from the plea deal that the WikiLeaks disclosures had caused no known physical injury. And on RM Breakfast, author Kathy Lett, a friend of Assange, took that lack of proof one step further, claiming,
"It's been shown that nothing that Julian's, when he released the various documents, nobody lost their lives over that. That has been proven categorically."
That is not true. And for what it's worth, ex-US intelligence analysts still maintain that WikiLeaks put people in harm's way, with Gail Helt, a CIA critic of Guantanamo, tweeting,
"Julian Assange is no hero. He is a despicable Russian asset who harmed hundreds of people and dismissed them like they didn't matter. Let's not venerate the man. He caused great harm."
And CNN's national security analyst, David Sanger, who worked on the trove of diplomatic cables with the New York Times, says no proper journalist would have acted like Assange.
He didn't do what I think, Laura, you and I would consider what journalists do. Sift through material, figure out what's important, exercise some judgment about what you publish and what you don't.
And last week, NPR's media correspondent David Falkenflik was asked,
Assange called himself editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks. In your view, was he a journalist?
I don't think so.
But, journalist or not, and Assange's defence team insisted he was, the more important question is, does his prosecution for espionage and guilty plea threaten the work of other journalists and imperil media freedom? Many, like Peter Grester, who spent 13 months in an Egyptian jail, believe it does.
I think that is going to inevitably have a very serious chilling effect on public interest journalism. It's difficult to imagine that anybody who is sitting on confidential information or considering similar reports is not going to see this case and think, this is just too dangerous to touch.
Not least because, in the wake of WikiLeaks, governments around the world have toughened up their secrecy laws and signalled that they're cracking down. As Alan Rusbridger told the ABC last week,
somebody who, like me, as an editor who published the WikiLeaks revelations, but also the Snowden revelations, could now face in the UK up to 14 years in prison. And these laws are crafted so that you don't have any defence. You can't explain to a jury your motive or why you thought this was in the public interest or this material was important. And so they're very, very restrictive pieces of legislation to use against journalists.
And despite our government's role in freeing Assange and bringing him home to Australia, and our Prime Minister proudly advertising it, you don't have to look far to see a similar crackdown here, with ever tougher national security laws and a string of whistleblower prosecutions, as shown by the cases of David McBride, Bernard Collaery, Witness J, Witness K, and Tax Office whistleblower Richard Boyle. And last week, Foreign Minister Penny Wong warned the WikiLeaks founder that the Labour government won't tolerate him leaking secret information on home soil.
We have laws in Australia in relation to national security information. We expect those laws to be observed by all citizens and by all entities.
A warning shot for a man who never believed in the rules of publishing or journalism, but was behind some quite remarkable revelations, and who has now, after 14 years, got his freedom back. And even most of his critics admit it was time.
Front page fodder. 18-year-old Tom Dutton and a bag of unknown white powder. The son of Opposition Leader Peter Dutton, the centre of a media storm.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that media storm was whipped up by the News Corp tabloids, who used a leaked Snapchat photo of Tom Dutton in a Gold Coast apartment to fire off a salvo of damaging front pages. The Herald Sun going big with this drug pun headline.
Dutton blow.
Exclusive.
And then quipping inside.
This can't be all white with Dad.
While the telly trumpeted powder keg. Only for both, after all the nudge, nudge, wink, wink, to offer this legal disclaimer saying they were
not suggesting the white substance is drugs.
Oh, really? So, who wrote all the headlines and why all the fuss? And while the Courier Mail and the Advertiser did not go the full Monty, Dutton's disgrace was still front-page billing. And of course, TV hosts then followed it up by trying unsuccessfully to get a rise out of Dutton's colleagues.
Look, I think it's journalism at its grubbiest.
And his opponents.
I'm not going to comment on that. You know, kids are off limits.
Peter Dutton's a public figure, his son is not.
And after the Daily Mail pinched and posted the story, plenty of readers agreed, saying,
"No fan of Dutton's, but this is no one's business."
Just because Dad is a public figure doesn't make him fair game.
And that sentiment extends to journalists as well. News Corp's Sam Maiden saying she felt profoundly uncomfortable with some of the news coverage, while failing to point out that her employer, News Corp, was the culprit. With Maiden asking,
does anyone seriously propose that there's some sort of profound public interest in what his 18-year-old son is doing on the weekend?
Meanwhile, the ABC, Guardian and Nine papers, whom Dutton so often attacks, either ignored or dismissed the story, with Michael Rowland saying,
I think politicians' families should not be subject to the media gaze.
And surely that is right. Tom Dutton is not a public figure, and he didn't choose his father. But the 18-year-old will live with the shame of those front pages for the rest of his life. However, there was an angle the tabloids ignored that could have given real value to the story, as Seven's Chris Reason pointed out.
Just 4 months ago, Mr Dutton was pushing for new post and boast laws, making it a criminal offence to post any material depicting drug offences or criminal activity. And he was advocating for a 2-year sentence.
So, will Peter Dutton still be pushing for punishments like that after his son's alleged white bag misadventure? That's a question the media could well have asked. Let's finish on Joe Biden's bad night out.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many...
I've seen you swing. I know you swing. Let's not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to...
Let's not act like children.
The first presidential debate took place in Georgia last week and was pitched as a night to remember.
The most anticipated moment of this election, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
And the Australian media was also hyping it up.
It's time for the battle we've all been waiting for.
A battle of the ages. The debate that will change the world.
With the ABC, 9, 10, 7, SBS and Sky all taking the CNN debate live. But as soon as the 81-year-old president opened his mouth with a hoarse whisper...
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me.
The alarm bells were ringing. And 8 minutes later, Democrats were panicking as Joe stumbled and fell.
For what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
The Trump team immediately shared the president's confusion on X and claimed Biden was melting down in real time. So, Trump's lies about abortion, migrants and the Jan 6 attack on the Capitol went almost unnoticed, as commentators and viewers homed in on Biden's undeniable fragility.
Tonight, he just looked too old.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. Not a good night for Joe Biden at all.
That was painful. I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden. He didn't do well at all.
There's a full-on panic about this performance.
There's a real concern here tonight that there's been some real damage done that cannot be undone.
And one look at the post-debate headlines proved that right.
Panic.
Time to go, Joe.
Just sad.
We'll see where it goes from here. But over the weekend, the New York Times joined the chorus of voices calling for the president to step down. So bad was Joe's performance that he's almost achieved unity in the divided American media, just about all of whom are saying it is time to go. That's all from us for tonight. Don't forget Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, till next week, goodbye.